Hello, this is Data-Driven Formula One, and as always, Patrick, Henz, and Ganna Pogrebna here.
Hello, Ganna. Thank you. Hello, all. Wherever you are watching to us.
Hello, everyone. Today we're talking about 1959 season.
Yeah, time is flying. The last race of the 50s.
Yeah, finally we got to the end of the 50s. Yeah.
Right. So let's jump in. Season in a nutshell. Quite interesting. Various people with different pole positions, different fastest laps, winning drivers, different constructors. So a quite interesting season, and something which we will see. Something which we started to see in '58, the dawn of the front engine cars, and since now the rear engine cars should dominate Formula One up to today.
Yeah, so quite a remarkable season yet again. I guess the important part, well, when you look at the constructor column, you can basically guess that Cooper Climax was was the winner, right?
Yeah.
But when you look at driver's table, you probably cannot tell, because we have 2 wins for Jack Brabham. We have 2 wins for Stirling Moss. We have 2 wins for Tony Brooks. So you're probably wondering who won the season.
Yeah.
And that was, of course, Jack Brabham.
Exactly.
Yeah. And this was the first time when Australian guy won the championship. Because Jack is Australian.
Who would thought this?
Yeah.
Who would thought this? Because the Brabham team have been British.
Yeah, that's right.
Most of the teams.
Yeah, of course. And of course he was driving Cooper, but he's
that time.
originally from Australia. That's what I meant.
Right.
Yeah. So, and then we will also see Bruce Mclaren in this season, right? So he won the American Grand Prix. Obviously, Bruce Mclaren is from New Zealand. So we see kind of many Brits, we see Australian, and we see New Zealand. Yeah, New Zealander in the race.
Also something different than all the last races. Maybe you see it. We are not starting in Buenos Aires, but we're starting quite unusually with Monte Carlo. And here we already see a victory for Jack Brabham, and the first victory for the Cooper team. We had last year a win of Private Cooper right in the beginning of the Rob Walker team, but now it's finally also the real company car had been able to win a race.
Yeah, I just noticed that we have a typo. Obviously, we meant Monaco, not Monaco.
Right.
Monaco, that's what we meant there. But basically, yeah, I mean, this also was quite a remarkable season. We did mention this in 1958, but if you just started to watch this series from 1959, it's important to say that the previous 2 very, very kind of prominent drivers. So the last season's champion, Mike Horton, and Fangio, the guy who won multiple Formula One championships, they retired at the end of 1958, which meant that we now had this new wave of many drivers, all very young, well, relatively young, all very interesting. So with quite distinct styles, and it was quite an interesting season.
If you compare it to the beginning to 1950, also unfortunately due to the fatal accident, we do not have top Italian drivers in the championship. This also if you can believe the rumor, because Ferrari took an internal decision based on all the problems they'd been facing, based on court, based on the critics by the Catholic Church, that they not would hire Italian drivers anymore.
Mm-hmm.
So we see a lot of British drivers. We see Jack Brabham from New Zealand. So we have a lot more diversity than in the beginning of the series.
Yeah, you mean Jack Brabham from Australia and Bruce McLaren from New Zealand. Yeah.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah. No, it's okay. Indianapolis. So Bruce McLaren surfaced in this race. So it was a very interesting race, and that probably is that the first time when we had someone won initially in Indianapolis and then kind of was making its mark in European races eventually. Is that the case? It must be, right? Because previously we had that, people kind of either would stick to one or the other, right?
Yeah, something interesting, what we will see also later with the drivers. We had quite a couple of successful US drivers in the Formula One Championship, even if the series itself not is that popular here in the States. So I think this is also something interesting in that 59 season.
Yeah, and also Bruce McLaren, he competed, I think, next season in Argentina, but probably not in any of the European races. I don't remember whether he competed. Did he compete in the European races? Anyway, I don't remember, but when we get to 1960 season, we will find out. Also quite a tragic fate, as you know. Bruce McLaren died very young. He was only 32 when he died. So quite a remarkable career despite the young age. And this was his first.
And also, again, same as last year, quite tragic race. Indianapolis, as two drivers had been killed. Jerry Unser from the Unser family, quite a dynasty in motorsports here in the US, and Bob Kortner.
Mm.
And interesting fun fact, last year's winner, Jimmy Bryan, who really used the identical car than the year before in 57 and 58. But in this time, he fell out of the race after only one race. One lap.
One lap, yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Oh, Joe Bonnier on the right-hand side. Yeah, so also quite a remarkable figure because he was Swedish. He was from Sweden, and I think this is also the first time the Swedish driver won.
Definitely, it was the first.
A race. Actually, Joe Bonnier, I hope that we're going to talk about him separately, like a very, very remarkable character. And so he lived until kind of 1970s, and he was also quite a figure in the sport. And this was his first win, racing win.
Yes, and in opposite to the 58th season, where he started, I think, with his own team, he was driving now for the own racing organization. So won a victory for a private team against the manufacturers.
Mm-hmm. France kind of Tony Brooks, whom we saw in other races, and also quite a remarkable driver, and I think was a little bit in the shadow of Stirling Moss during the majority of his career, but very, very interesting guy. Again, also I recommend if you manage to get to see his interviews. Highly recommend watching them. Quite a character.
Yeah, And so even if we had the general dominant of the rear engine car, here France, we had a 1-2 for Ferrari because second place went to Phil Hill. And this is one of the mentioned US drivers which we have this year in Formula One.
Mhm. Okay, well, yeah. So the British race, yeah, quite a it was a different race because it was very very big in the sense that there were many entries, right? So many 30 cars entered at that time, and yeah, again we had quite an interesting race there. Yeah.
Yeah, interesting. It was a race without red cars because there had been strikes in Italy, as they had been quite common over the decades at that time. And I know it was a common problem for Enzo Ferrari. So he wasn't a big fan of the labor unions, to say it that way. We discussed in the last episode about Tony Vanderwall that Enzo and Tony maybe not had been the biggest fans, but they respected each other. So due to the situation, the Ferrari driver Tony Brooks received permission to start in the UK with a Vanwall and not a Ferrari. Even if the Vanwall, as we also discussed in the last episode, wasn't very competitive, and honestly, he retired quite early after only 13 laps.
Yeah. Germany.
Yes, Germany, in opposite to last year's, the Grand Prix was in Berlin at the Avus. The Avus is practically it's part of the Autobahn, so part of public streets, which they close for the weekend. So there are two very long straights and two 180 degrees curves.
Was that why did they go to Avos instead of? Was that do you know? Was that because of the of all the accidents that happened? Like, was there just was that deemed unsafe by Ferrari?
Honestly, I don't know why.
Oh.
I mean, Avos, it's not the first time when they used this track. The Avos already, it's quite traditional in Germany. It already existed before the Second World War. So it's a quite old racetrack, even if it's not permanent. But I don't know why in 59 and I think also in 1960 they rose on the Avos.
Well, this is probably a question for our viewers. So if you know why they changed the track from Nürburgring to Avos, let us know. Yeah.
Yes, and similar what we discussed in our 58 season about Indianapolis, even if it looks very simple, Indianapolis being an oval or Avos being two straights and two 180 degrees curves, it has its own rules and dangers. And tragically, in a race before the Formula One, John Barra died with his Barra Porsche Special. Barra also had a Formula One team which consisted of him and also about Philippa, I forgot the complete name now. The first female driver.
Maria Teresa de Filippis.
Exactly. So, and due to this, as John Barra was not only her manager but also a good friend, she retired from Formula One after this.
Yeah, but we also need to mention that she actually, that season, she did enter with actually on Barra Porsche. So she was racing Barra Porsche. There was, I think she only qualified for one race, if I'm not mistaken. And yeah, but after this tragic event, she basically didn't race.
Exactly.
Yeah, but she, I mean, it would have been actually quite interesting, I guess, to see Porsche to be more kind of active in these competitions. But as Patrick mentioned before, it was actually a Formula 2 car, so you couldn't technically enter it to every single race, only the ones that only on circuits where it was allowed.
Yes, and of course Germany as their home Grand Prix, so it was also important, let's say, for the local market. Still in the 1950s, the local manufacturers, their main market, of course, were their home market.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Portugal.
Yeah.
Well, again, we had Stirling Moss there, but I mean, this time he was not helping anyone.
No.
like last year. And yeah, but he obviously was competing for Cooper that year and won the race as well as the Italian race as well. You know, right? So he also won the Monza, the following race in Monza.
Yes. But also important, he not rode for the Cooper manufacturing team, but the private Rob Walker racing team, which was a highly professional team, but let's say was not the company team.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you know, another thing, I think, you know, this racetrack in Portugal was quite lucky for Stirling Moss, because we see him being quite successful on it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And then he continued his success on Monza. So, of course, winning Monza always something special. So he did it. He repeated with the private Cooper T51.
Mm-hmm. Bruce Mclaren, again, he's from New Zealand, so as we emphasized last time. He's not British. A lot of people think that he's a British driver. He is actually a New Zealander. Yeah, he was also driving a Cooper car, and you know, yeah, quite remarkable. I guess that I think this is. Kind of broke the chain of Offenhauser domination in American
No,
Grand Prix, right?
honestly, I'm not sure because in opposite to Indianapolis and Sebring, they drove under Formula One regulations. So they only, if I am correct, they only had been the European, so say that teams because they had other technical regulation as they start in Indianapolis. So I think practically it was the first attempt to bring Formula One to the US, because
To the US properly.
now it was really a Formula One race, not IndyCar race, which they just included into the agenda.
Mm-hmm.
And as you see, it wasn't very well perceived. So it was a financial disaster practically for the
Yeah, of
organizers.
course, because they didn't see the favorites. I mean, the people probably
Exactly.
didn't go. Yeah, that's right. But nevertheless, I guess much thanks to this this race, we have Bruce Mclaren now with us in spirit.
Yes, just to add, I mean, we already we never spoke about it. We mentioned various times that besides the official championships, there have been many open races which not have been held. And we had for several years in Monza, like I don't remember, the 200, 500 miles from Monza, where had coming the US teams to Italy and to drive against the European cars. So we already had the attempt the other way around, that the IndyCar tried to go to establish itself in Europe, and this is now the other way around, the European teams going to the US. So slowly we see that this this original reunion, having Indianapolis inside the Formula One calendar, would go away, and we really have a real Formula One a real Formula One race also in the US.
Mhm.
And
Yeah,
let's
look at the cars.
look at the cars. And here we have the winning car, the Cooper T51.
Yeah.
And let's say just looking at the photo, I mean, it doesn't look like much. I mean, it doesn't look that elegant as other cars before. It looks a little bit like self-made. If I want to be a little bit provoking, but nevertheless, it was very efficient and it won the championship.
Yeah, and I think it's then we can also see why Jack Brabham was so comfortable in it, because I thought that he started with this kind of mini cars, right?
Yes.
If I'm not mistaken, yeah. So he started his career in mini cars, and that's why he kind of that looks like almost like a karting car, right?
Exactly.
And you can see, I mean, to be honest, it's almost like it a little bit descaled in terms of protection, because like I think Ferrari or Maserati from previous seasons, they look a little bit more protective of the driver, because here like you're practically half of your torso would be sticking out of the car pretty much, so not just the head, but like, yeah, I think you're really exposed in this
And
one.
also not very aerodynamic, of course.
No, it's not. No, it's not. But yeah, but I guess it is pretty fast. Like any
Yeah,
kind of,
it must be. I mean, it won the championship. So,
yeah. In terms of, I think it's just very light. That's the thing.
yeah.
Yeah, very light car.
Yeah.
BRM, yeah, BRM P25. I mean, I don't think we should stop too much on it, because we've already showed it in many previous seasons. Yeah,
Exactly the same with the Ferrari 256. It was development based on the 58 car. Only the position of the pipes has changed. So unfortunately, I don't have a photo from the 59. So this is the 58. And as I've shortly mentioned, Enzo Ferrari and in general the Ferrari team may have a little bit misjudged the whole situation. And I mean, there's this famous quote: "The horses pull the carriage, not push it." And with this, I meant Enzo that the Ferrari has to be in front and not in the back, which maybe was not the smartest decision, but this is what it was. So the drivers did the best. They won some races, but not really the championship.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So yeah, very very cool. Still very cool car, but yeah, probably slightly outdated.
Yes.
For the
Same with the Maserati. I think they still
finally,
have been,
I mean, last when we discussed 1958, you told me that we will say goodbye to this photo.
yeah, sorry.
Still with us.
Still have been some small teams using the 250. So really, I'm quite sure this is the last time we see that photos.
Yay! But
Something what I liked to mention, a little bit more a fun fact, because this car never had been competitive. Former Maserati engineers, they used the 250F, and I mean, if you look at the photo, it still reminds a little bit to the original Maserati, but honestly, it looks very strange. It
does look like Cooper, right? That we showed at the beginning, because it's almost also like this karting car. Yeah.
Yeah, but in opposite to Cooper, it wasn't really a fast car. It wasn't a reliable car. And I also would say it wasn't really a beautiful car. So it looks that they took the Maserati and again, compared to this design,
They just decided to make a
They-
Cooper out of Maserati.
Exactly.
Someone took a hammer and decided to kind of beat the hell out of it to make it into a karting car.
Yeah. So it was the team was called Tech Mac, and they used this Maserati F415. That's how they called it. but it wasn't. It was a pure private approach. And again, compared to the design, it is really beautiful design of the Lotus 16, even if unfortunately it wasn't highly successful.
Yeah.
But it looks fast.
Yeah, it was fast, not very reliable. So I think that the problem was in reliability, and also the problem was in difficulty in attracting drivers. Yeah,
Correct.
And small team.
And with this, we're coming to another famous name from UK, but also not really playing a role in 1959, which is Aston Martin.
Yeah.
Yes, of course, interesting. Today, if you're listening to us now in 2020, because they announced their return for the 2021 season. I mean, honestly, I think besides the name, it doesn't have much in common, as practically for 2021, they bought the Racing Point team and just rename it now to Aston Martin. But be honest, this had been done other companies before, as for example, Jaguar in the beginning of 2000, I think. Anyway, so the first time we had Aston Martin in Formula One was in '59.
Yeah, beautiful car.
It is.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. Still, I mean, it's kind of like a hybrid between,
Yes.
these previous makes of Ferrari and Maserati and Cooper, because you're still kind of sticking out quite a lot from the car, but at the same time, it kind of looks prettier than.
Yes, I agreed, and you're right. We are somehow in the between, so it seems that the engineers, they still not don't know where they want to go, and as we will see in the later, in some years, in the beginning of the 1960s, when we have really the cars 100% made for rear engine cars, and the designs look much more elegant as now in '59, where we are in between somehow from the front to the end. Another big name, also not playing directly a big role, Porsche with the Formula 2 car.
Yeah, but it's amazingly now looking more like Formula One car, because
Exactly.
yeah, if you remember previous season, well, Patrick found like really cool photo, but it was like, it looked almost like normal car.
It was practically a normal car.
Yeah, normal luxury car. I mean, this one actually looks like something that is used for racing. I mean, I've never seen the 718 18/2, but yeah, it looks nice. Does look nice.
Agreed.
Like everything that Porsche does, I have to say, looks nice.
Yeah.
Probably, I guess that engine reliability wasn't great on this, like judging from the make, but who knows? I mean, looks very cool. Yeah.
And this something which we saw before.
Yeah, Van Wall, they tried to come up with a new car for 1959, but yeah, I just think that Tony van der Waal wasn't feeling great, and yeah, it just didn't work out for them that season, and practically the team disappeared very quickly.
Yes, so practically they still reused this car for the very few races they had, especially for the British Grand Prix. And as always, also a look on the Indianapolis 500 winner. And this time we have this Watson Offenhauser. Very American looking, American colors, lots of commercials. Also, I mean, looks like a very fast race car. It looks like a race car should look like, and still with front engine.
Yeah, perfect for oval circuits.
Exactly. Let's have a look on the drivers. As we already mentioned, The victory goes to Jack Brabham for the Cooper Car Company.
Tony Brooks in Ferrari this season.
Yes, unfortunately, same problem as we had all the years before. There are no photos from Tony Brooks.
Yeah, so he's kind of this guy on the right there.
Yes, so quite shy guy, no photos.
And this, this is actually one wall. This is not from his kind of Ferrari career. Yeah, I think there are plenty of photos of Tony Brooks. It's just that it's difficult to find anything that we could share with you guys. Yeah. But if you Google Tony Brooks, you will find the picture very quickly. Sterling Moss, obviously, also a great guy.
Yes, and interesting driving a Cooper, but for the private Rob Walker racing team.
Rob Walker racing, right.
Then we have Phil Hill, US driver for the Scuderia. As I've mentioned, I don't know if it ever was officially confirmed, but there is the rumor that Ferrari said no more Italian driver with all the fatal accidents we had. So now we have Tony Brooks and we have Phil Hill as the drivers for the Scuderia Ferrari.
Mm-hmm. And Maurice Trintignant there again sort of racing for Rob Walker racing team. Yeah. Also on Cooper, I guess, right?
Yes, and Bruce Mclaren for the Cooper Car Company.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And again, another US guy, Dan Gurney, driving for the Scuderia.
Job Bonnier, Sweden. I just want to remind Sweden, this is a Swedish driver, which is quite unusual. And Master Gregory and for Cooper.
Yeah, another US guy, if I'm correct. So really we see a lot of US drivers, quite interesting because up to 59, I mean, the Formula One hasn't been that popular, at least not for the general society here in the country. But it seems that for drivers, it was good solutions, and maybe because of technical aspects, because we're having more interesting tracks as the ovals. So whatever reason, we had various successful US drivers in 59.
Yeah, I mean, it's not like that the previously US drivers didn't want to race in Europe. It's just that normally they unfortunately would die before they would get there, so they normally competed in some competed in some races in the US, and they basically the negotiations happened previously with American drivers. It's just I guess the careers were quite short considering the risk that they took.
Unfortunately. This let's
behavior in the season. Notable characters. Well, the award is shared for me between Jack Brabham and Bruce Mclaren, because this is the first time we kind of see them, in prominence, kind of winning races and all that. In terms of notable wins, that's a good question. I would still go with Bruce Mclaren because it was in the States. Probably not the usual, not the usual circumstances. I don't know. Maybe you have different. What the notable winners?
I would then say Brabham in the first race. It was the first victory for him, for somebody from New Zealand, and for the Cooper team. So. And as Cooper should be very relevant for the next years, the 1960s, I would say that was the notable win.
Maybe also Joe Bonnier, his win in the Dutch Grand Prix for Sweden, the first kind of win for Sweden. In terms of accidents, what would we pick? This one, I mean, luckily we didn't have many. I guess we still would have to go with Jean Bera, right? Jean Bera, the loss of Jean Bera, even though it was not in the main competition.
Yeah, because I agreed, because it affects his Formula 1 or Formula 2 team. And you may add, of course, the fatal accident in Indianapolis, because let's say it's repeating that at this particular race, the last year, there always seem people are dying. So it's quite repetitive accidents, while fatal accidents, while in let's say in Formula 1, the deadly accidents had been on various tracks, so not always on the same one, like in Indianapolis.
Notable strategists, I guess the strategy winner coincides with constructor winner is Cooper Climax.
Yep.
Simply because they had really diversified strategy of competing as a constructor and also offering the technology to private teams that were competing out there.
Yep. Exactly, because I mean, before the season, Ferrari was the favorite, because the other leading team, Vanderwell, practically not participated, and so for many, Ferrari was the favorite to win. But then we saw Cooper, and you may say the notable strategy for them was that to build the engine behind the driver, which up to today is the winning formula.
Yes, indeed. So that this is the introduction. Well, it's not the introduction, because we saw obviously makes with rear engine before in Formula 1, but I guess this was the kind of the show the dominance, so you can actually completely dominate the season with this type of make. And that was quite, I guess, a risky strategy. But then, they also, I think the car, like the way it looks, at least, it's like almost this karting car, like really light, really fast car. Yes. It probably, I mean, it's just my guess, but I'm guessing that probably was slightly cheaper to produce than the other kind of more fundamental structures that we saw on a track. And this is why they managed to get this diversification going with having their own cars and having the cars that they sold to others.
Yeah, I agreed. And I think this is also practically Cooper's legacy, as they're practically maybe not the first, but the one who really made the rear back engines successful in Formula 1, and made everybody, let's say, going the same way after a while.
Yeah, I mean, to me, this was like, if previous one was British season, I'd say that this one was really, Commonwealth, in a sense, Commonwealth season, because we had quite a few, apart from Brits, we also had Australian and New Zealand, like New Zealanders, and so we basically had international competition, but for some reason we didn't see many Italians, even though Italians were competing, but they were just not,
yes, as I said,
not winning.
As I said, I think at that time, as Ferrari seemed to avoid having Italian drivers. Again, we still had the lawsuit. I think it was the last year, but the critics from the Catholic George was very fresh, so they really may have avoided to hire Italian driver as an active decision, and without the possibility to go to a local race team, of course, for Italian drivers, it was difficult to climb to the top.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so that brought us to the end of the season.
Yes,
And
the end of the decade.
to the end of the decade. So next time we will talk about 1960. Yay!
Yes, the Royal 60s. A lot of interesting stories, I'm sure. So I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah, me too, me too. Meanwhile, you can find us not only on YouTube, but thanks to Patrick on all of these different platforms. Yes. So you can not only watch us, but also listen to us. As always, let us know if you missed anything or we made any errors. Hopefully not, but
Not too many, hopefully.
Yeah, but let us know if you spot anything. We're always interested in hearing your opinion. And thanks a lot, and we'll see you next time.
See you. Bye-bye.
Bye.